Welcome back. It is time for Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate you. And we also appreciate you subscribing to the podcast. If you already don't do that, please do that for us. Wherever you get your audio, just search Silver and Black Today. Turn on the auto download there after you hit the subscribe button. That way you don't miss a show anytime. We got some great stuff coming up this week and next week going into draft week. Hold on to your hats. We're going to have some great guests. We'll get to that in a second. But as always, my broadcast partner along with me on this journey is Mr. Moton. He is the national NFL writer over at Bleacher Report. You can follow him on Twitter at Moemoton. That's Mo Moton. You can follow me at LV Gully. The show is SNB Today. And Mo, we're almost done with all this prognostication, all the guesses, all the rumors, and we're going to go through some of those today. But I, for one, my friend, am getting very excited that this thing is almost upon us so we can get past all the guessing games and get to the reality.
So what do we got? We got 9 days left until the draft till you have to read these stupid mock drafts that they're going to tell you where people think players are going to go. Because we're always wrong. Has there ever been a perfect mock draft ever? I don't think so. So if you're stuck on this player is not going to be available in this spot, you might as well move off of that because every draft year there are surprises. But like you said, I'm just ready for the real deal and the results.
Absolutely. And obviously a lot happening with the Raiders. We've talked about over the last few weeks the lack of excitement or some of the excitement. I've had some of our listeners and viewers, for those of you watching the show on YouTube, who shared with us this past week that, hey, actually, I am excited. Now, the overall feeling isn't one of excitement. We've talked about that for the last couple of weeks, and the reasons for that are why. But certainly, there is the feeling out there, okay, let's get this over with. And also, for those of you skeptical about Dave Ziegler and Josh McDaniels, you'll either have your feelings validated or they'll surprise you and you'll feel better about where the team is going. I think that's a big part of the psychology, Mo, for Raider Nation.
You know how this works, though. Every draft year, there's a group of fans that will talk themselves into anything the regime does. And there are a group of fans that will question anything that the regime does. So it's gonna be fun. I'm usually more active during draft night. This year, I'm gonna be doing the live show at Bleacher Report. I think you're gonna be on with doing our part with Odyssey. So
yes,
fans will have to choose like parents choose between their two kids. Who are they going to watch on draft night? You're going to watch me on Bleacher Report. You're going to watch Scott. We're both going to have great shows. So wherever you land, you can watch both of us. You can check in. You can switch back and forth. You can have two screens up because I'll be on the app. Scott, I'm sure, will be online. You can get them. Yep. So it's going to be a fun time.
Well, yeah. And for our show with Odyssey, which we're going to later in the week give you guys details as well, I'll be in just when the Raiders make their pick. So it's going to be a guest spot for a few minutes to react to that. So unlike Mo, who will be covering the whole first round, if you're just focused on the Raider stuff, you can drop in on us as well, too. So you can get it in stereo. You put your phone, you put your computer.
Yes,
you can see us both, pseudo Silver and Black Today, just from two different outlets at the same time. So anyway, it'll be a lot of fun. But Mo, the other thing, too, and we talk about this all the time, especially during the offseason, whenever a big free agent or a big player out there wants to change teams, of course, the Raiders fans, especially if it's a position of need, jump on it. We saw a couple reports, Silver and Black Pride, I think, wrote one up, and a couple other folks about Budda Baker. Budda Baker, the safety, talented safety with the Arizona Cardinals, has asked for a trade. Now, the Raiders have a need at safety. There's no question about it. This draft is not a good safety draft. Budda Baker is one of the best out there. He's only 27 years old. If you were to go get him, you'd have time. But the downside is, dude wants a new contract. So guess what? You're going to have to pay the man. And if you're going to have to pay the man, what worries me there, Mo, I would love to see Budda Baker in the Raiders' backfield. I just don't think it would be prudent at this time with the needs they have across the board and what it would cost to get him.
Now, I will say that someone did correct me on Twitter, and basically the tweet reads, initially when you read Adam Schefter's tweet about Budda Baker, it reads as though he wants a new contract and that's why he's unhappy with the Cardinals. But if you reread the tweet, and I guess I don't want to call it semantics, but depending on how you interpret it, it could mean that if he's unhappy with the Cardinals, and he'll stay with the Cardinals if they make him the highest paid safety. But if he goes elsewhere, he may not want to be the highest paid safety.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say to that, my response to that gentleman on Twitter was, even if he does go to a new team that's a contender, he's probably going to want a new deal, because right now he's 7th in annual salary among safeties, and he's a 2-time All-Pro. So I would imagine that he's going to want his either, I wouldn't say top of the market, maybe not the highest paid safety, but he's going to want a pay raise at the seventh highest paid safety in the league right now. So I would think that he's going to want 16 million or more. He's about 14.2 million or somewhere around that. He's under 15 million, but he's going to probably want to go over that 15 million mark. It's probably going to be one of the top 5 paid safeties in the league, similar to how Devin White wants 18 to 20 million on his new contract. And it was funny because, not to ramble, but Scott, remember we talked about Devin White on the last show, and Raiders fans are like, "Oh, Mo, you're crazy for not wanting Devin White." And once they saw that he wanted 18 to 20 million, a lot of people were like, "Oh, no, I'm not interested anymore." And this is my point about acquiring players via trade. It's not as simple as, "Oh, he will be the best player at the position if we acquire him." You have to look at the money. You have to look at the market value.
Yes, and let's put aside the fact of what you brought up last show about Devin White, which is he's an off-ball linebacker. He's not going to help you again. So from that perspective, you're paying all that money for a limited guy who's not going to really fill a gap for you all the way around. So there's that too. But the Budda Baker thing, we understand, and you get that. Now, if there's a way for them to swing it where it doesn't, and I think a lot of Raider fans are kind of upset that they're not making these big splashes. And if you saw our good friend Sashi had talked about, well, this and that, I think he'd said something about not going after the lukewarm free agency, and we went back and forth joking with each other. But my thought was, folks complain about not signing these big name free agents or going out and trading for big name players, and then when they don't work out or they limit you from a financial standpoint to go out to get the rest of what you need, then fans aren't happy. So you got to look at it both ways. And as a fan, I understand the feeling, but remember, think through all of the intangibles and all the other things that are connected to it. If you can't just go get a guy because you need somebody there.
You have to look at it from a big picture standpoint. And I want to say, not all fans are in Madden mode. There are some fans too that understand that if you pay one player this amount of money and of course a top of the market deal, it limits you from doing other things. And the Raiders at this point, the way Dave Ziegler's, and I've said this at least 10, 15 times, the way Dave Ziegler has approached this offseason, he's not interested in paying guys big money. Even Jimmy, people say, well, what about Jimmy Garoppolo? Jimmy Garoppolo has an incentive-laden contract, and his contract relative to the quarterback position is moderate. It's not top of the market. They're not paying Jimmy Garoppolo $40 million.
Right.
If you look at the contracts the Raiders have doled out this offseason, none of those contracts are huge deals. It's a bunch of contracts that are either one year deals, 1 to 2 million, 3 million here or there. If this was last offseason when they were acquiring Devonta Adams and Chandler Jones and paying those guys big money, then I would say it's a possibility. But this year it's clear they're putting their eggs into the draft.
Absolutely. And that makes the draft even that more important. As we talk about it, it's important anyway. We've been talking about it for weeks here on Silver and Black today. And so we'll continue that. Mo, before we cut to the break, a couple things I want to talk about, which is number one, our good friend Matt Johnson over at Sportsnaut wrote a mock draft. And I've seen this actually a couple other places and a lot of chatter around the Raiders being rumored to move up to number 2 in the draft, right? We talked about there's only 2 quarterbacks that they like, Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. Matt's mock draft had them moving up at a pretty significant price. This is what he said. They trade the 7th and 38th pick overall and a 1st and a 2nd in 2024 to the Texans for the 2nd and the 188th overall pick. So that means the Raiders would be all in on CJ Stroud. I hear this a lot. I think that the possibility remains. I think for me, my gut tells me it's diminishing unless they can get value out of it. And CJ Stroud, too. I want to shout out to Michael Lombardi, our friend over at the GM Shuffle, who talked about CJ Stroud. And this is something interesting because you and I both were on the same page. We felt he was QB1 in this draft, right? Now, CJ Stroud, though, as Lombardi said, he's hard to coach. And that's not a negative. He said that he's just a different guy. He takes a different approach then you have to coach other quarterbacks, other players. And with my questions around Josh McDaniels, now I know Josh McDaniels developed quarterbacks and helped with quarterbacks when he was in New England, but that kind of concerns me too, because you look at the player, what his needs will be. He might be a little more of a high need coach guy, and I don't know if Josh McDaniels is good or bad for that.
Okay, I'll say this, and Mike Lombardi's been on our show, so he obviously has a wealth of knowledge. I don't want to dispute what he sees in a player, a prospect, or what he's heard, or his information. But what I will say is that at this point in the draft cycle, you're going to hear all sorts of stuff about prospects, and I'm not saying take everything with a grain of salt, but there was a conflicting report that said C.J. Stroud is coachable. The day after Mike Lombardi had his comments, so it's. For me, personally speaking, Mike Lombardi's comments aside, any other report aside, if CJ Stroud is there at 2 and I'm able to trade up for him and it's not an exorbitant price, now that was the steep price that Matt Johnson had in his mock draft, but if you feel like CJ Stroud could be your franchise quarterback for the next 10 to 15 years, you do the deal because we've talked about this. The quarterback position is so valuable that it could change the trajectory of your franchise if you get the right quarterback. If you get the right defensive tackle, it doesn't necessarily change the trajectory of your franchise. J.J. Watt will be known as one of the best defensive linemen in NFL history, multi-time defensive player of the year. How many titles did the Texans win with him? You know what I'm saying? This is what I'm saying. Even if you get a generational talent on your defensive line, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win a bunch of playoff games. Even Aaron Donald, the Rams had a good team around Aaron Donald, but the Rams didn't get over the hump until they traded for Matthew Stafford. Yeah. So you have to get the quarterback position right above all else. You can get all these defensive linemen, a good corner, a good linebacker, but those things don't move the needle as much as a quarterback. You know this. You bet, Scott, and I bet. When the lines move, usually what happens is because there's a quarterback change, there's a quarterback sitting. This year, when the Raiders sat Derek Carr, the line moved, I believe, 3 points in that 49ers game. If the Raiders had sat Max Crosby, that line wouldn't even move, maybe a half a point. So the guys in Vegas, the guys in the bookies are telling you the quarterback position is the ultimate value position, and that's the position you have to get right because it can change everything.
Absolutely. And it'll be really interesting, Mo, if this scenario, or a scenario similar to the Raiders trading up with Houston to take a quarterback, i.e. C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young. It looks like it'll be C.J. Stroud. That'll be there at 2. We'll see. It would be interesting to see the reaction of Raider Nation because, again, a bold move to move up to number 2 to get your guy that you think is going to be your franchise quarterback, but then the need on defense, it would be another polarizing pick. No matter what they do, I think it's going to be polarizing until this team can turn it around and start proving people wrong by winning.
And therein lies the problem is that on one hand, you get your quarterback, and I get the other side saying you should go defense and not trade the farm for C.J. Stroud because C.J. Stroud's probably not going to play unless Jimmy Garoppolo gets hurt. So the reason you got Jimmy Garoppolo here is to take the pressure off of having to take a quarterback early in the draft. So I understand that side of the coin saying don't trade the farm for C.J. Stroud. He's probably not going to play. He's probably not going to start week 1, and you're still going to need a defense around him. So I get that. But if you feel that strongly about a quarterback, this is my bottom line. This is my philosophy. If you feel that strongly about a quarterback, you get the quarterback.
Yep, I agree. All right, we're going to step aside for our first break here on Silver and Black today, an Odyssey Original podcast. When we come back, we're going to talk Josh Jacobs. What's the status of a new contract for Josh Jacobs? Could it be a distraction heading into the next season? We'll talk about that. You're with Mo and Scott here on Silver and Black today. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. It is Silver and Black today, talking all things Las Vegas Raiders football. I am Scott Gulbransen, your host, along with my co-host, Mr. Mo Moton. He's a national NFL writer over at Bleacher Report. Follow us both on Twitter. I am at LV Gully. He is Mo, M-O-E-M-O-T-O-N on Twitter. Mo Moton on Twitter. The show is SNB Today. Shout out to our YouTube audience. Thank you guys for being with us. By the way, a couple people in the YouTube audience didn't like my hat last show, Mo.
What was wrong with your hat?
I don't know. Somebody said it was too small for my head. I do have a big head, but that's supposed to fit that. That's the kind of hat it is. And then number 2, it was no comment. He said, you need to get rid of the hat. I'm like, nope. So funny. Anyway, So I'll
I have
wear
to go back and
it.
look at the show, look at the hat.
I don't know. Hey, but everybody's got their opinion, and we welcome them here, even if we disagree. So thank you guys for that as well. Mo, let's jump into this story that came out that we saw. Vinny Bonsignor this past week in the Las Vegas Review-Journal, our friend who covers the Raiders for the newspaper in Las Vegas, talked about the Raiders and Josh Jacobs really not any closer to and really not actively pursuing contract negotiations. Vinny reported that. I didn't think it was anything to be concerned about, nor did I think it was a big deal, because as he said in the piece in the RJ, hey, they're focused on the draft. Duh, as they should be. But here's my question we start off with. Number one, if they aren't talking contract because of the draft, no big deal. Because of the situation and what's going on with this team and so many unanswered questions between now and training camp, really, between your draft picks, how you negotiate with them, who you sign, depending who you sign. If you move up to the number 2 pick and you got to sign a big quarterback like we talked about, yes, they're on the rookie deal, but you still have money you got to spend there on bonus, signing bonus, and all that stuff. So there's a lot of questions out there. To me, the Raiders would be practicing financial malpractice if they went and get a big contract to a running back at this point. As much as I like Josh Jacobs, as much as I'd like to see him in the silver and black for the next handful of years, I think they're just being prudent.
Yeah, two comments here, and I'll start with the shorter, more simpler one. And it's what you said is, what's the rush? The Raiders have until July 17th to sign Josh Jacobs to a multi-year deal that goes for all franchise type players. The deadline is always, mid-July. So they have time. It's not like if they don't do it before the draft, the deal is not going to get done. And you also have to understand with the unpredictable nature of the draft, who knows? The Raiders may swing a trade for a player who wants more money. Who knows? Or they may acquire someone. So you want to keep you don't want to tie up money to a running back who, again, the running back position, very low on the market value on a ledge, because you have to understand, as I said, off-ball linebackers, safeties, running backs, the reason why their franchise tags are so low compared to the other positions is because market value is low. So I've written pieces over the past 2 weeks about unhappy running backs. Austin Eckler wanted a pay raise or a new contract. The Chargers cut off negotiations with him. Saquon Barkley has not signed his franchise tag. He wants a new deal. He's unhappy. The top running back in free agency, Miles Sanders, signed for a deal that was less than $7 million per year, and he's coming off his most productive season with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I tweeted this to Matt Holder, who wrote the piece over at Silver and Black Pride about Josh Jacobs, that running backs are getting the worst of it this offseason. They're just not getting paid big dollars, and you're seeing it. Josh Jacobs won the rushing title. Franchise tag. Saquon Barkley coming off a productive year. He was the focal point of that Giants offense that surprised a lot of people this past season. Franchise tag. He's unhappy. Austin Eckler has had the most touchdowns of any player in the league over the last 2 years. 38 touchdowns. He can't even get the Chargers to talk to him.
Right.
So that tells you where the market value for the running backs are. And so I'm not surprised that the Rays have stalled or cut off talks with Josh Jacobs for now until after the draft, possibly.
What interests me, too, about this situation with the running backs, Mo, is I see people, fans, I see pundits, I see journalists talking about, like, for example, the Austin Eckler situation and how unfair it is and how this. And it blows my mind, because it's like, guys, are you not paying attention to the market? You just laid it all out, Mo. You just laid it out perfectly. And it's sort of like if I start talking about the stock market, and let's say there's a sector, let's say it's automobile makers, and their stock is down because people just don't see a lot of return on it or whatever it may be. But man, I'll tell you what, Tesla's doing great and all these other car companies putting out all this great product. How dare you not invest in them? It's the same thing. I know we're talking about people, so don't get me wrong, especially from a fan perspective. These are people you get to know, you get to care about. Josh Jacobs is one of those guys. I mean, Raider fans love Josh Jacobs. Everybody does. But you look at it that you can't look at it that way. In the business side of things, these players are an investment. They are a product, and you look at the market for what's happening right now. I mean, we saw what happened with Barkley in New York. We saw what happened with Eckler. Now we're seeing what happened with Josh Jacobs. It's just not their time. And so if I am, for example, Josh Jacobs, maybe I'm okay playing under the tag, actually, if you think about it, right? From a long-term perspective, the need for running backs, the market may change in a year or two. Now, you could also get injured and your career could be over. Who knows? But to me, the market's not going to change, and you can't get upset because that's what the market is.
Yeah, I see it from a player perspective. You're trying to get your money and some long
Sure.
term security as quick as you can. So I get it, pushing for a new deal. But from a business perspective, you just laid it out too, that I get it from a market perspective. You have to look at the market. As I said in the first segment, it's not as easy as just signing good players. You have to look at value. Is he worth, because I don't want to put a value on a person per se, but is his production at his position worth
Right.
this contract? I'll even add a couple more names. There are trade rumors swirling around Dalvin Cook and Derrick Henry. Now, if you
Mm,
know, Dalvin Cook is a multi-time Pro Bowl player, over 1,000 yards in multiple seasons. Derrick Henry's been the soul of the Tennessee Titans offense, and there are rumors swirling around him about he could be moved on draft day. Joe Mixon is not a lock to be a starter with the Cincinnati Bengals in your hometown. There are rumors that he could be let go. So it's all about value, and we all know the running back position is so much turnover there. As you said, you can have a great year, win the rushing title one year, get hurt and have 800 yards the next year, and teams are just not willing to pay for that type of production because they can get a running back in the third, fourth round and get similar or more
right.
production out of that player. So again, it boils down to the value and the market value of that position.
Yes. And everybody's looking at that ledger, like you said, and they're looking at where they're going to spend their money. They got to spend it at quarterback. They got to spend it in the trenches, right? We saw what Philadelphia did there.
Offensive line.
And so what they're going to do is that's what dictates decisions. So with the Josh Jacobs situation, I mean, I think the biggest and most salient point you made is what's the hurry? There is no hurry. They have till July. We'll see what they do. If they don't come to an agreement on a new contract, let's say Mo, by the time that the camp rolls around and the new season rolls around, is there any chance the Josh Jacobs situation becomes a distraction for this team? I don't think Josh Jacobs is the kind of guy that would be that way, but it could be in the back of his mind. I mean, if he's on a tag year, clearly the better he plays, the better for him. So he's got lots of motivation to stay focused, to stay on the field, to stay a top performer. But is there any chance this becomes a distraction?
I'll say yes, but I don't want to say that in the sense that Josh Jacobs becomes a problem. I don't want to make it seem
No,
like Josh
that's
Jacobs
not
would
that's not what we're
potentially
talking
cause
about.
friction.
Right.
Right. So I'll say that, and I'll connect this to the Budda Baker conversation we had in the first segment. Remember what Josh Jacobs said during, I believe it was the Super Bowl week. He said, if you're building a team around me, I'm okay with the franchise tag. You're spending money on other guys. I get it. You know, you can only spread so much cap space and money around. But he said, if you're paying me to be the hero, I want to be paid like the hero, basically. I'm paraphrasing. But basically, he said,
Yep.
if you don't have a lot around me, then you better pay me some money to carry the load here. So the Raiders did spend money on Jacoby Myers. We'll see what they do in the draft. Maybe they add an offensive lineman. But I think Josh Jacobs is going to look around and say, where is this team headed? And that's why I connected to Budda Baker, because I think Budda Baker is just unhappy where the Cardinals are, because the
Hmm.
Cardinals are a sinking ship. Let's be honest.
Yep.
Torn ACL for Kyler Murray, new regime coming in. He's looking around saying, I want to be on a contender. And if I'm going to play on a bad football team, you guys are going to have to pay me more. And I
Hmm.
think this is what Josh Jacobs is going to have to weigh in his mind. If he feels like the Raiders can compete in 2023, I think he'll be fine with the franchise tag for a year. But if he feels like the Raiders are going nowhere and they're not going to be competitive, he's going to say, you got to pay me extra money and give me some financial security. I understand that.
Yes, and I agree. I think what it'll depend a little bit. We'll see what happens with the draft, what they're able to do, and who else they're able to sign, and where this roster, because they have some time between now and July to kind of form that roster, right? And if I'm Josh Jacobs, I'm to what he said exactly in your words. If I'm gonna be the hero, if it's gonna fall on my back to carry that offense, for example,
Pay me.
you got to pay me. So I totally get that, and I think that is a fair position. So we'll have to wait and see. But the fact that they're not talking. Good. The front office should be focused on the draft because they need to nail it in this draft to get this team turned around, in my view.
Yeah, it's just definitely too early to freak out about that. We're about what, 3 months away from the deadline. There's so
Yep.
much time left.
There is a lot of time. All right. Speaking of time, we're going to step aside real quick for a break. When we come back, Mo and I are going to get into some more stuff, some NFL stuff, a Raider anniversary that we will celebrate, a pretty remarkable anniversary that comes this time of year around the draft, and we'll talk about that when we come back as well. You're listening to Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast. Don't go anywhere. Silver and Black today on this Tuesday. Yes, just a week and 2 days, 9 days until the NFL draft, when we'll see your Las Vegas Raiders make their move. Thanks for listening to us or watching us, whichever you're doing. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, do us a favor. Subscribe wherever you get your audio. Hit on the auto download as well, so every time a new show hits, you will be notified. And on YouTube, hit subscription and then hit on the notifications bell so you know when there is a new video. And so that's all we ask of you. That's all we ask of you, is to do that, listen, be part of the discussion. And of course, the discussion here is led by my co-partner here, my partner in crime, as I call him. That is Mo Moton, national NFL writer over at Bleacher Report. You can catch his work up on Bleacher Report. Of course, Mo, you just had another live session yesterday, right?
Just had another last session, so you want the replay on that. Of course, it's obviously talking about Raiders draft topics and who they should draft, who they should avoid. So if you want to catch the replay on that and you didn't see it live, it's on the Bleacher Report app. If you're in the Raiders community, all you have to do is tap the Raiders logo. You know what it looks like, obviously. The video will pop up at the top of the feed.
That's right. It's Midtown Mo, so you got to check it out. So make sure you do that, as well as following him on Twitter, MOEMOTON. I'm at LV Goalie. Okay, Mo, listen, a couple things that we want to just go around the NFL. First, I'm going to start with a big Raider anniversary. 23 years ago, this past week, Al Davis did the unthinkable. He selected a kicker in the first round 23 drafts ago, Sebastian Janikowski. Now, it ended up working out for the Raiders overall. It was a hell of a kicker, beloved former player and a beloved member of Raider Nation, no question about it. But Al Davis, the Maverick himself, takes a kicker in the first round, and since he's done that, no one else has. Amazing anniversary for Seabass, as they call him in Raider Nation. But I remember when it happened all those years ago, Mo. I know you were probably an eighth grader by that point.
Yes.
But you look back at it and you look at it under today's lens and you think, holy crap, who would take a kicker in the first round, no matter how good they are? But Al Davis did, because Al Davis did what he thought was right and what he wanted to do.
Hey, they got a Pro Bowl year out of Janikowski, right?
They sure did.
And some fans can tell you some legendary stories they got out of it. So I guess that's worth it, right? But
absolutely.
Can you imagine the Raiders taking a kicker in the first round? I mean, I understand they're set at the position right now, but can you imagine if the Raiders needed a kicker and Dave Ziegler and Josh Daniels took a kicker at 7th overall? Now I know Janikowski was 17th, but that's still
17th.
Like the fact that he went the first round.
Yeah.
And then went in the middle of the first round. It wasn't like the last pick in the first round. It was the middle of the first round. If that happened today, there would be riots in the streets of Vegas, Oakland, and Los Angeles.
Yes. Fans. They'd be going nuts. We need cornerbacks. Why are you taking a kicker? Well, I know, like you said, they have kickers right now. They're perfect in that situation right now. But it really is remarkable to think of it. And again, he went on to be a great Raider. Don't get me wrong. But still, the value of the kicker, I know you could roll out how many points he scored, all that stuff. But if you look at the history of the team during that time frame, obviously they needed more help in other areas to be a champion, and they didn't ever get it. So just a really interesting case study. I think somebody should write a book about that, like just the whole thing, how it happened, then after it happened, what it did to the franchise. I mean, there's so many angles with that story.
The funny thing is that the following year they went to the AFC Championship game.
They did.
So it didn't set them back in a short-term sense.
Not in the
they
short
went to
term.
the playoffs the next 3 consecutive years. So I guess in a sense, not a wild move back then, 23 years ago, but now you would be run out of the building the minute that pick.
Yeah. And to your point about the playoff seasons after, look, they were on the cusp, and Al Davis figured, hey, we can't make kicks. If we can make kicks, how many games do we win? I'm sure he did it. I'm sure he did the math, and his scouting department said, hey, if we would have had a kicker who didn't miss all these field goals, we would have done this, this, and that. So remarkable story. And I just wanted to bring that up since that was the anniversary. And I know a lot of folks out there who listen to the show love Seabass, so we wanted to give him his due.
He's one of the beloved Raiders of all time.
Absolutely, and you can understand why. All right. Mo, around the NFL, the sale of the Washington Commanders, it looks like that's happening. Apparently, the price is coming in lower than the NFL owners want. I know everybody out there is crying for the NFL owners who might get a couple $1 billion less than they anticipated. But I think the sale of the Commanders, Daniel Snyder and his reputation, of course, we have all of the incidents and the investigations going around the Commanders in the front office with harassment and all sorts of nasty, nasty things. Of course, the Raiders were connected to that investigation. That's how John Gruden lost his job. But the sale of the Commanders is good for the NFL. We don't have exactly all the information on the new ownership group, but this is something good for football, and I think good for that organization finally and for those fans.
People have been trying to flush Daniel Snyder down the toilet for years now because of what's been going on with the Commanders and what's been going on in the front office there and all the stories that have come out of that organization. So I guess it's a fresh start, and I think the league would want that. The other thing I want to note before we got on, there supposedly might be a bit of a holdup because another billionaire, Brian Davis, I believe his name is, he's a DC native. He would be the first black owner to have a team, and he's actually had a $7 million cash offer. So there could be a snagging. Josh Harris, I know, is involved in the initial offer of about $6 billion, and Magic Johnson is also in that group. But there seems to be some competition there, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of left it open ended, and I appreciate that. I think that there's people who want in, right? The NFL Owners Club is as an exclusive as a group as there is in the world, really. If you think about it, 32 people, 32 ownership groups, and all individuals with the exception of the Packers, of course. But if you look at that and the opportunity and the issues involved in Washington, to your point about minority ownership, the NFL does not have an African-American owner. There is none. And so I know that there's been talk of this, and you mentioned some names there, and I think, Magic Johnson, to your point, being involved there. So we'll see how this goes and how it ends up. But clearly everybody's ready to get past Daniel Snyder. And Daniel Snyder, don't cry for that guy, because remember, I think he bought the team for $400 million, and he's going to sell it for what, $6 billion? I can't remember the number. But he's going to make a killing on it. So yes, he's going to go away, and people can feel good about that Daniel Snyder's out of the league. But the guy's going to make a huge investment return for his money.
Of course. And the other thing that I want to connect to this, and it has to do with the draft, is Daniel Snyder was he was a hands-on owner. If you remember, he was involved in the picking of the late, who passed away, Dwayne Haskins, who passed away tragically. He was involved in the Washington football team making that pick. Yep. So with him out of the picture, I wonder, does this change anything about direction of the team and draft plans and stuff like that, because he's one of those owners who will meddle and say, I want that guy. Now, the Commanders have been touting Sam Howell as their starting quarterback. I don't believe that for a second. They did bring in some competition. Jacoby Brissett is over there now too. Mm-hmm. So he's a backup quarterback who's had some starting experience. So they have a little bit of a competition. But I'm wondering if with Daniel Snyder out of the picture, what does that mean for Commanders as a football team? And they're one of the teams that are in on your guy, Hendon Hooker. And I believe he had a visit with them recently. So it's going to be interesting to see where Hendon Hooker, the wild card of this quarterback class, ends up.
Yeah. And interesting too, Mo, is the sale. I mean, obviously the sale's not going to be done in 9 days. Right. So technically he owns the team until the sale closes. So he will be in charge of the draft. If I'm the owner buying the team, knowing that, I don't know how you handle that, because if I'm the new owner, I don't technically own it yet, but so does the NFL step. I don't know how they do. I think Daniel Snyder can do whatever he wants. We've seen reports that he's going to be vindictive and he might just let the team go to heck. I don't know, but it's crazy to think about that, because when you're in that kind of no man's land of a sale and you got a draft right in the center of it, interesting to see how they'll handle it.
I don't know any billionaires. But I would guess that billionaires don't go out quietly. They usually like to have their way, so I would assume that he's gonna go out kicking and screaming.
Of course. Well, he's a big baby anyway. Everybody knows this, so we'll see. Mo, before we cut out of here for the day, because I know the next 2 shows are going to be chock full of incredible goodness, including on Thursday, Brian Baldinger. Baldy will be back with us for our pre-draft lookout, and then I'll be on with Baldy on draft night. That's who's going to be co-hosting the national show for Odyssey, which I will talk about after the Raiders pick at 7 or wherever they pick. But we're going to get on with him and ask him a bunch of questions about the draft and how it's shaping up. The last show we did with him was so telling and interesting, and he brought forward his knowledge. It'll be really good. I want to know what his gut is telling him about this Raiders team and what he's hearing and how it might shape that top of the draft, because the Raiders could reshape the draft. If they trade up to number 2, it would change things around significantly for some teams. Remember, there's 4 or 5 teams in this first round that could use a quarterback. And so if that's the case and the Raiders move up to number 2, there's teams behind them that will be scrambling to either make Anthony Richardson a number 1 pick, believe it or not, in my book. Number 2, Will Levis could suddenly find more value because the other 2 guys are gone. And number 3, you have Hendon Hooker, who even some people say, despite the knee injury, he could be into the first round, the bottom of the first round at least. So it's going to be interesting to talk to Baldy and get his opinion on how this thing could be upended if the Raiders make a move at the top.
If I had to take a guess, based on what he talked about with us last time, he spent a lot of time on the defense, and he also liked Jermaine Illuminar, and I also like Jermaine Illuminar. A lot of Raiders fans know that. But I think he's going to say the Raiders have to get the best defensive player available on the board, regardless of position, because they need a defensive tackle, obviously. They need a linebacker, obviously. There are no linebackers worth the 7th pick, though. And they need cornerbacks. And that's why I've been on record. I've been on Twitter. I've been on my Bleacher Report Live show saying the Raiders need to take the best. If they're not going to take a quarterback, they need to take the best cornerback available, whether that's Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez on their board, Joey Porter Jr. But I think he's going to say the Raiders go defense. Now, he may surprise us and say, well, if Anthony Richardson's available, I know you're going to cringe at this, but I'm wondering if I'll ask him directly. I'll say, if Anthony Richardson is available, do you take him at 7? And do you think he's worth a top 10 pick? Because I know we disagree heavily on this one.
Yeah. No, we'll definitely ask him that. I also want to get his view on Jalen Carter, because whether or not the Raiders select Jalen Carter or not, I know we talked about him on the last show, but I'd like to hear his point of view on it, because again, the consistent noise I'm hearing about Jalen Carter is when he plays, there's nobody better, but he doesn't necessarily play all the plays. And if that's the case, how much of a risk is an NFL team going to take? So I'm really focused on getting his take on that, and a little more too around some offensive line prospects, right, Mo? We haven't talked a ton of that on the show here. We talked about a few, but the Raiders, like you said, Jermaine Illuminor are doing a great job, but they still need depth. They need some youth at that position too that they can bring in, I think, in addition to seeing if there's somebody that they can bring in as a veteran too, perhaps between now and July. But he knows those positions obviously well. He covers it. He played it. So I want to see what his view is on the trenches, because I agree with you. I think the Raiders not only need to get that cornerback, but they got to get defensive tackle. They need help in the middle, and they need help on the offensive line as well. I mean,
I'm not saying Devin Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez are going to be as good as Sauce Gardner, but look at what getting a top cornerback did for that Jets defense. Now, amazing. I know they made some other changes, but Sauce Gardner was basically an all-pro defensive rookie of the year. You get a top cornerback to show up the back end of your defense. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, it doesn't matter if you don't have a pass rush, but let's be honest, the Raiders do have Max Crosby. I know they need more than that, but we'll see what Chandler Jones is in 2023. They re-signed Tillery, who's more of a penetrating defensive tackle. If you don't have a player of value at defensive tackle or edge that's worth the 7th overall pick, you get the best cornerback and shove it back into your defense.
Absolutely. It's going to be fascinating. We can't wait to have Baldy on again on Thursday. So make sure you download the show. Make sure you join us on Thursday. And then next week, right before the draft on Tuesday, we talked about Matt Holder and his piece on Josh Jacobs. He's going to be on the show with us. He is on the Bleacher Report draft. What do you call it? Draft team? What do you want to call it?
Scouting team.
Yeah, scouting team. That's right, scouting team. So Matt will be with us. He's a Raider fan too. So not only will he give us the black and white unbiased opinion, but then he'll also throw in sort of his, hey, I'm a Raider fan. Here's what I'd like to see them do. So we're going to get kind of best of both worlds, right, Mo?
Definitely the best of both worlds. We actually at Bleacher Report have this banter going on between among me, Matt Holder, and Brent Sobleski. Brent Sobleski actually thinks that Anthony Richardson is worth a top pick, But he also thinks that the Raiders are going to draft Will Levis. Me and Matt are kind of Matt may be lukewarm on Will Levis. I'm saying no, I don't want Will Levis. I'd rather have Anthony Richardson over Will Levis. So we'll have some fun with that when Matt is on with us next week.
Yeah, I said Levis a long time ago, if you remember. I kind of said and it would not shock me. I'm less negative than you are on Will Levis. I'm probably more in the boat as those guys, kind of just lukewarm. But I could see it happening. I think Raider Nation would crap a you know what.
Yeah, I can definitely see the Raiders taking Will Levis. I see Will Levis as more of a Josh McDaniels guy than Anthony Richardson. But if it was me making the pick, if I'm going with Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, and Brent Sobesky wrote a piece about this, I'm trying to take the player with the most upside. And I think Anthony Richardson has more upside than Will Levis.
I would agree. He's an amazing athlete and really just at the beginning of kind of growing into himself. So totally get that. All right, my man. Well, I appreciate you as always, and we're going to jump out of here, and then we will see you back on Thursday with Baldy.
Also, really quick, if you're listening to this in the morning, tune in with me on the Bleacher Report app. I'm doing a live mock draft of just the first round, and I actually have the Raiders pick at 7. So if you guys like the pick, you can vote for me.
That's today, Tuesday, right?
That's today, Tuesday. You guys can vote for me as the best drafter, because there are going to be 4 of the people drafting for teams. I'm drafting for the Texans, the Raiders, the Ravens, the Bills, and the Steelers. So if you like the Raiders pick, please vote for me as the best drafter on that Bleacher Report app on draft day.
It's not Anthony Richardson, is it?
We'll see. No, it might surprise you.
Oh, I love it. All right. So you will have listened most likely to this show in the morning, and then you can tune in, or early morning, and then you can tune in to the live mock draft with the Bleacher Report guys. At what time?
That's noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time.
Good. There. So you can listen to them back to back. There you go. Either way, it's good. On the way to work, and when you get to work, perfect. I look forward to it. All right, Mo, I will see you on Thursday, man.
Sounds good.
All right, for everybody here at Silver and Black today, including our producer, David Stepanian, my co-host, Mo Moton, I am Scott Gulbransen. Do us a favor, make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get it, and we will see you Thursday with Brian Baldinger. Baldy will be back. We're going to dive deep with him on the draft. He's going to give us his gut feel for what the Raiders are going to do on day 1 and beyond, and we'll also get his thoughts on some other players and some other possibilities in the draft next week. So we appreciate you guys being with us here on Silver and Black today. For everybody here, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you on Thursday. Bye-bye.